Hi, everyone. We have heard for years that the discussion around IQ versus EQ. And I remember back in the 90s when I was starting my business that a lot of people didn't know what EQ was. We knew IQ, right? That's that left hemisphere type of idea, the how we analyze, how we sequence, but very rarely have we discussed EQ. And so, what I'd love to do today is have a discussion around IQ versus EQ. We can start with women, for example, and how we can encourage IQ and EQ with women so that they can feel more empowered, and then also discuss men. So here's my experience. I'll start it off, and my experience with my clients as a trainer and as a coach is that women have traditionally a higher or faster access to their emotional quotient. We all have emotional quotient, whether you're a male or a female, but women seem to have faster access to it. And I think it's because we are hardwired to have children. So we know how to access that nourishing ability that we all have. So I love to see my female clients tap into that EQ power. And also, I love to see them tap into their IQ power. So again, let's establish the difference. IQ is your intellect, your ability to analyze and sequence, and your EQ is the side where you can really build relationships, right? Where you develop your creative side, and it's also your connection to spirit, to God. And so we have been conditioned throughout our business lives to focus on our IQ, right? To use our IQ, because that's how we're going to grow our business. But we all know that the businesses of today, the best ones and the ones in the future, are the ones who tap into that emotional quotient, because business is really all about relationships, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Thoughts?
Mm-hmm. Lots of thoughts. As you were talking about your coaching and your training business, and me thinking back of my experience, like advising and consulting with businesses and corporations and leaders and executives, and particularly women versus men. Generally, I agree with you. I think they're women as females, we have a very natural ability to tap into emotions and kind of make that a part of the equation. What I have found, though, to be true with the clients and companies I work with, and particularly female leaders, was that something really interesting happens, that oftentimes the men were more of those that had more of the emotional intelligence and were really wondering and asking how people were doing and taking a moment and feeling more secure in who they were, versus the women that were in leadership roles. And that is very intriguing and actually very interesting to me that is the case. And I came to the conclusion that the female executives I work with that were more, or that were less of the emotional intelligence, the challenge was that it seemed that their ego came into play. Their ego, their power, their desire to have the say-so, to have the last word, to be the decision maker. And then that in combination with oftentimes limiting beliefs that perhaps could come from the fact or the time when we felt as women that there are less seats, and in some places that is still the case, where there are less seats for women, and you had to fight so hard to get to a point like that oftentimes they get very defensive and very competitive, especially with each other, that takes away from that emotional intelligence. So I have this theory of what I call leadership 2.0. What if we as female executives or as female leaders work with other women and really empower each other in that. So we can tap into these, what I call superpowers of emotional intelligence, because let's face it, emotional intelligence is rarely taught in schools. Like when you're little, I mean, if anything, then it's maybe if you, at least in my experience, you grow up and as a girl, you're supposed to be kind, you're supposed to be nice, you're supposed to be this and that and the other thing. But when it comes to school, it's your grades, it's how well are you doing in school, it's your intellect.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
It's what you remember, it's what you recollect, it's what you study and apply. But it's not so much about how are you as a human being, how are you on the emotional side. Mm-hmm. And even, you know, from an example of a doctor who is a friend of mine, and when she shared with me how, and that might have changed up to now, but it used to be much more on how do I get into like studying for medicine, and you had to have a certain intellect and a GPA in order to even get in there. Was a very heavy focus on that. But mm-hmm. when you think about it, if you're a doctor, doesn't the emotional intelligence also play a role? Yeah. So it's just an interesting conversation and discussion, whether you're dealing with, you know, coaching clients or companies or corporations, that I think we are moving towards that, where people realize that emotional intelligence is a very, very important piece in it all, if not perhaps more important. Not sure we're quite there yet.
And you know what is important, I think, for all of us to realize is that building that EQ, that emotional intelligence mm-hmm. within ourselves, we shouldn't be frightened of it.
Yeah.
I remember when I first started coaching, and I would ask my clients, male or female, well, how do you feel about it? Not what do you think? I would say, how do you feel about that? Mm-hmm. And the women, women, when they gather together, they often speak about their feelings. Not all the time, but they do. And the men would say, well, give me an example of a feeling. So what I did was I developed a chart, a feelings chart, 25 constructive feelings and 25 unconstructive feelings. And it gave them a baseline. And then they were learning how to express their EQ, right? Mm-hmm. So they'll say, well, I'm angry, or I'm in judgment, mm-hmm. or I'm frustrated, or I'm not accepting, you know? So it's interesting. I think you're so right. We have to learn EQ. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We learn IQ in school, but we don't learn EQ in school. And if our parents are not teaching us EQ, then we have to learn it somewhere.
And the meaning we give experiences, you know, being emotionally intelligent doesn't mean that's a weakness. It doesn't make us weak. In fact, it makes us quite strong.
Makes us stronger, I think, to have a balance of IQ and EQ. And that's what I attempt to do with my clients, give them that balance. So they're not just relying, because some people, men or women, are very right-brained. Mm-hmm. So they're EQ driven, but their IQ is very low. So I think it's really important to have a balance. Yeah.
Can anybody out there hear me?